The situation in West Asia and the Middle East is indeed intensifying. The escalation of Israel not a week ago to begin the month of April, striking the Iranian consulate in Syria, killing several of Iran's top generals and several other military personnel, has been met with a furious promise by the Iranian government and, of course, the entire axis of resistance of a response. And the United States has been on alert. There have been talks. I think the Swiss have been mediating talks between the United States and Iran. There has been communication. And it appears that a response is going to happen soon, likely before the end of Ramadan. However, many should note, and we should all note, that we do not know exactly when Iran will respond and retaliate. And that I agree with those who say that Iran would be well served, as they always have, in not taking bait from Israel, not being dragged. It's Iran itself that is counseling the United States, I'll get to that in a minute, to not be dragged into a regional war because of Israel. So it's quite clear that this could happen at any moment. It could happen as soon as before the end of Ramadan, before the end of the week of April 10th, or it could happen later. We don't know. But the United States says it's preparing for a significant Iran attack on U.S. or Israeli assets in the region as soon as next week. So this is the breaking CNN report of April 5th. It says the U.S. is on high alert and actively preparing for a significant attack that could come within the next week by Iran targeting Israeli or American assets in the region in response to Monday's Israeli strike on Damascus that killed top Iranian commanders, a senior administration official told CNN. Senior U.S. officials currently believe that an attack by Iran is inevitable, a view shared by Israeli counterparts, that official said. The two governments are furiously working to get in position ahead of what is to come, as they anticipate Iran's attack could unfold in a number of different ways, and that U.S. and Israeli assets and personnel are at risk of being targeted. Now, mind you, it's important to note that Iran is going to target military assets. They're not going to target civilians, people. People are not going to get in harm's way of this. This is likely going to be a strike on Israeli military assets. It's unclear where, though. Will they strike in the heart of Israel? Will they strike at its proxies wherever they are? It is hard to predict, but a forthcoming attack was a major topic of discussion when Joe Biden spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli prime minister, on Thursday. As of Friday, the two governments did not know when or how Iran planned to strike back. A direct strike on Israel by Iran is one of the worst case scenarios that the Biden administration is bracing for, as it would guarantee rapid escalation of an already tumultuous situation in the Middle East. Such a strike could lead the Israel-Hamas war broadening into a wider regional conflict, something Biden has long sought to avoid. And remember, there was the Al-Tanf attacks by the Iraqi resistance, if you don't remember, not too long ago, earlier this year, which was another kind of firestorm that just absolutely shook the United States in particular, because that was a direct hit on U.S. military assets. So it's been 2 months since Iranian proxies attacked U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, a period of relative stability after months of drone, rocket, and missile launches targeting U.S. facilities. The lone exception came Tuesday when U.S. forces shot down a drone near Al-Tanf garrison in Syria. The drone attack, which the Defense Department said was carried out by Iranian proxies, came after the Israeli strike on the Iranian embassy in Damascus. We assessed Al-Tanf was not the target of the drone, since we were able to immediately determine the target out of safety for U.S. and coalition partners. The drone was shot down. So this is the entire resistance, and I'm going to get into this later, how the entire axis of resistance is really making things hard for Israel and the United States, and putting on as much pressure as they possibly can to stop what is happening in Gaza. So they don't know anything. They're saying they're prepared for a significant attack. Okay, and that Zahidi, who was killed, right? Mohammed Reza Zahidi was very important. And remember, these consulates, these embassies, they are protected by international law. they have diplomatic immunity, and we're going to get into why that is. So, the United States denied the attack. They don't know where it's going to come from, but they said it is coming. But the reason why they know it's coming, okay, is because Iran is the one that has been warning about this. Iran, and I'm going to pull up the story now, has warned the United States, don't fall into the trap, Iran warns. Israel is bracing for an Iranian counterattack after Tehran's embassy in Damascus was struck. So Iran warned the U.S. to stay away from any potential clash between itself and Israel, while Washington has cautioned Tehran against targeting American facilities, says presidential aide Mohammad Jamshidi on Friday, April 5th. So Iran was the one to say there's going to be a response, and you are going to have to essentially make the right choice. That's what Iran was saying. Make the right choice. Don't mess around, because you may find out you are in the middle of something that you cannot you cannot tolerate, you cannot handle right now. And this is both political and military. The United States doesn't want it on any side or end of this. The economic fallout, the military fallout, the political fallout will be disastrous for the United States. The Biden administration is very, very, very delicate right now in terms of its status. So in a written message, the Islamic Republic of Iran warned the United States leadership not to get dragged by Benjamin Netanyahu's trap for the U.S. Stay away so you won't get hurt, said Jamshidi on X. In response, the U.S. asked Iran not to target American facilities. So there you go. You have the Iranians themselves warning the United States not to get involved. Why? Because there's going to be a strike. And now we see Iran making real preparations here for if this thing is going to get out of control. Because I'm going to show you in a minute the comparisons between Iran and Israel and how a war between them, of course, it would escalate into a broader regional war, could drag in the United States. And that's because Iran is actually quite formidable as a nation with a very strong and advanced military. But here is Iran. Here's some breaking news. It says Iran has started deploying hundreds of its advanced air defense units. The main and most important air defense machine that Iran possesses is the Bavar 373, a reverse-engineered Russian S-400. It's capable of targeting stealth targets. So this was from a Telegram channel. It's unclear whether we can verify this or not, but nonetheless, there is the video of the air defense systems being sent out, possibly in need of being used, should the response from Iran occur and cause a further escalation, because Israel has said that it will be prompted to respond should Iran retaliate. And mind you, remember, Iran has every right. That was a war crime that was committed. So you commit an act of war, nations have the right to defend themselves and to respond back as an act of deterrence. This is, in fact, what the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, this is what the Iranian government is saying. And this is actually a fact of international affairs, of war, of geopolitics, of international law. If someone commits an act of war against you, you have the right to engage in warfare for self-defense. So nonetheless, though, let's listen to friend of the show, Scott Ritter, his reaction to a possible Iranian response. He gave this report on Sputnik, all right? And we'll listen to part of this and then move on to the comparison of the Iranian military and the Israeli military. So here we go.
In the span of a week, the world has witnessed two wanton violations of international law and the norms and standards of civilized nations by the state of Israel. The first of these was an attack against the Iranian consulate building in Damascus, Syria. That building was giving host to several high-ranking members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command. But the fact that Israel views these officers as legitimate targets doesn't give them the permission to violate the protections that are afforded to these structures. Um, Diplomatic immunity is a reality, and these buildings, consulates, embassies, are afforded the inviolability of the protection of international law, and Israel opted to violate this. The consequences of this Israeli action have yet to be fully borne out. The world is standing by, awaiting a likely Iranian response, the timing and the specificity of which remains unknown, but based upon Israel's own reaction and anticipation, could be quite severe.
So, not only this, now that we know that the United States has been warned, it's unclear whether the intelligence, we have to understand that United States, Israeli intelligence, constantly wrong, a lot of times intentionally wrong, in order to to escalate, to generate fear in the public so that they can engage in illegal warfare, essentially. That is generally how the United States and Israel's intelligence agencies, especially abroad, have operated and at home as well. But also, we have to remember that this attack that Israel committed on Iran in Syria did not just kill military personnel, it killed Syrian citizens. I believe at least 6. Who knows how many really were killed? Um, and so this was a devastating attack. This was, I think it was an F-35 that dropped this. And so you know that the United States has a hand in this. The United States says they didn't know anything about this, which is absolutely ludicrous to me. But let's get back to Scott.
And this could throw not just the region, but the world into chaos, turmoil, and conflict, all because Israel decided that it could operate above the law. But operating above the law is the norm, the standard for Israel. And we saw that in the second action, the assassination of 7 aid workers working for WCF, a charity and an aid organization whose sole function is to feed people who are hungry, regardless of their ethnicity, their religion, their race, their creed. WCF fed Israelis and they fed Palestinians alike. But that was the problem, you see. WCF fed Palestinians, and the Israelis don't want Palestinians, especially those who live in Gaza, to be fed. Israel is in the process of implementing a policy of the depopulation of Gaza, eradicating it of the presence of Palestinian people.
So I wanted to play a little bit of that before we get into the military analysis, because we have to remember that this is the central root cause of why there are regional tensions right now to such a fever pitch. They're always there. We have to remember Israel is a Zionist entity literally occupying the region. Yes, Palestine, historic Palestine indeed, but also the Golan Heights, which is Syria. And we can't also forget how Israel has a hand all across the region in sowing chaos, whether it's covert, whether it's through airstrikes in Syria, so on and so forth. So it is Israel's actions that is at the root of this, and it's only so ironic or coincidental that this also comes as Israel has committed once again another horrific war crime against the World Central Kitchen aid workers, some of them former British intelligence, mind you, but a lot of Westerners were killed. That's why there was a big fuss about it in the Western mainstream media. But the real point here is that Israel has been doing this from the very beginning of this war, has killed hundreds of UN workers, has killed, of course, over 15,000 Palestinian children, likely many more, not to mention the tens of thousands of Palestinians that have been killed, the prevention of aid. We can go on and on and on, but that is the main reason why there are tensions right now rising to this fever pitch. And Iran is responding to a war crime committed against it that is at the root caused by Israel's absolute desperation. They are desperate. They want to provoke the United States into a regional war in order to save Israel from what is in fact a crumbling and decaying situation. Israel is in big trouble. They know it. They know that they are more and more isolated than ever. And they know that no matter how long they are able to commit this massive slaughter, they understand, the establishment, the ruling establishment in Israel understands that time is ticking because its whole entire existence was always on borrowed time. And now you have the axis of resistance, of course, becoming more and more powerful. And here is Iran. Sputnik did a great little analysis of the military situation between Iran and Israel. There's a reason why, despite Israel's bluster, there's a lot of fear for the United States in particular. Israel would never say it because Israel always has to look tough, right? They have to look like that attack dog that they are. But the United States is very concerned because Israel, as we will see, Israel has not so many advantages militarily. It is bogged down in Gaza by the Palestinian resistance, and any kind of tripwire that Israel decides to cross with the axis of resistance could very well lead to the end of Israel. And so why is this the case? Well, let's just look at this comparison. Who's tougher? Says Sputnik. The escalation in tensions between Tehran and Tel Aviv following Israel's missile strike on the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus on Monday has revived fears of an all-out conflict between the Middle Eastern powers. But which nation's military is better equipped for a large-scale conflagration? So as Israel braces for retaliation to its deadly attack on the Iranian diplomatic compound in the Syrian capital, with officials fearing Iran's response may include long-range ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, or drones, experts have warned that a direct tit-for-tat response may be exactly what Israel is looking for, suggesting Iran could achieve equally effective results using asymmetric means. While the two countries do not share a common border, each has missile, aerial, and naval tools to cause one another serious harm if tensions turn hot. Here's a breakdown of their capabilities. So this is important to note because it would be an absolute disaster and a mess if if Iran and the Zionist entity of Israel got into a literal shooting war. It would be a disaster. It would immediately go global. The United States would not be able to sit back. The United States has exercised zero diplomatic power over Israel. So this is the disaster that the Biden administration can't afford. Why? Because look at the comparisons here. The International Institute for Strategic Studies in early 2023 said that the IDF had 169,500 troops and about 465,000 reservists. Let's just say those are worthless. Those are just people with no experience, combination, all that. The ground forces include 126,000 troops. Air Force employs 34,000 personnel, 55,000 reservists, 9,500 personnel in the Navy. You have, but Iran's armed forces has 420,000 troops. Okay, that's a lot. This includes 350,000 servicemen in the Army, 37,000 personnel in the Air Force, 18,000 in the Navy, 15,000 in Air Defense Forces. You notice there was nothing here about reservists. Okay, these are forces that are ready to go. They're not those who are just called up out of their jobs, working in factories or whatever. No, these are professional military personnel. The Islamic Republic also has 230,000 troop-strong force of elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps troops, 150,000 in the ground forces, 40,000 paramilitaries, 20,000 in the IRGC Navy, and 15,000 in the air and air defense forces. It also has at least 350,000 trade reserve personnel to call up in the event of a crisis. So that's a lot. Why do you think that is? That's a lot. Those are huge numbers. And the reason for this, of course, is that Iran is a country that's been at war several times. Iran has, since 1979, it had the U.S. instigated Iraq-Iran war. And of course, we can go on and on and on with the fact that it is surrounded by wars always, mainly because of the United States and Israel. So Iran has been preparing for this moment for a long time, and those numbers definitely show it. So you have the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute calculating in 2022, Israel spends about 23.4 billion on the military, while Iran has a budget equivalent of 6.8 billion the same year. But it makes up for the smaller budget by lowering operating and armed procurement costs and, of course, asymmetric warfare as a member of the Axis of Resistance. And remember, there are sanctions on Iran, so it has to do things a bit differently than Israel. So let's see weapons. Both countries have large domestic defense industries, allowing for production of everything from small arms and tanks to drones and missiles. Israel has built up its defense sector in cooperation with the U.S., while Iran, subject to decades of sanctions, looked inward to produce as much of its defense needs domestically. Israel is likely to have an important trump card, nuclear weapons, while neither confirming nor denying its possession of such arms, a deliberate ambiguity. And also remember that Israel practices this ambiguity with these very strikes on foreign territory. When Israel strikes Damascus or Syria, generally, it has not admitted to the strike, despite the fact that the United States has admitted it was Israel that killed the Iranian generals in the embassy in Syria. You'll never hear Israel admit to anything that it does, and this also includes building a nuclear weapon stockpile, having up to 80 air and missile deliverable nuclear weapons. And so Iran, though, has rejected it. Of course, you all know about the Iran nuclear deal. There's been a lot of pressure for Iran to actually develop nuclear weapons, like a lot of nations have done in order to protect themselves as a deterrent, like the DPRK, for example. But they do not have it. Okay. So then combat experience. So fighting over a dozen wars and counterinsurgencies, both in neighboring countries and with Palestinians from 48 onward, Israel is by far the more battle-hardened military in the Middle East. However, the ongoing conflict in Gaza has demonstrated its combat prowess is not something passed on between generations, despite as it faces considerable problems fighting Hamas and other militants in Gaza. With the pace of the operation against the 25 to 40,000 troop force much slower than expected and casualty already heaviest among any 21st century conflict Israel has had to date. So Iran has considerable combat experience as well. As I said, the Islamic Revolution was forged in the fires of brutal conflict with Iraq, which lasted through the 1980s. It cost up to 600,000 Iranian and 500,000 Iraqi troops, and over 100,000 mostly Iranian civilians were killed. In the decades since, Iran's military gained experience in multiple other conflicts, from domestic insurgencies to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps advisory assistance to Hezbollah against Israel in the 2006 Lebanon war, to the Syrian Iraqi governments during their fight against foreign-backed, U.S.-backed militants in Iraq and Syria. So if the crisis, so we're talking about allies now. Allies, of course, you have Israel having the United States. You also have, of course, the vassal states, right? In the Gulf, they're not allies, but they indeed are useless. But you have military bases that form a ring around Iran, including in Iraq, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. Then you also have the Fifth Fleet. The U.S. presence in the region includes this, a forward deployed strike carrier group, logistics, mining, demining, submarine, and reconnaissance forces. It has used this Fifth Fleet extensively for past wars of aggression, such as Afghanistan throughout the past 2 decades. And so, of course, I spoke about the axis of resistance, Syria, Iraq's resistance. You have Lebanon's Hezbollah, and you also have the battle-hardened Houthis. And, of course, you have the fact that Iran is part of the multipolar world. So good on Sputnik to conclude those factors, because it is very important to note that the multipolar world plays a role in how such a war would come about. But as you can see there, this is not going to be a cakewalk for Israel should Iran respond. And it has been Iran's own ability to withhold and restrain itself from these provocations that has, to be honest, uh, given the opportunity, so many opportunities for peace to thrive in the region. But it's been Israel, it's been the United States that has constantly provoked a response from Iran, has tried to provoke a response from Iran in order to really save Israel. That's what this is really all about. Because while the United States has an overarching objective of destroying Iran, the United States is very willing to play a long game, at least the majority of its neocon foreign policy hawks. They're willing to play a relative long game. Israel doesn't have the time. And now that Israel is beleaguered, embattled, completely mired in a guerrilla war that they cannot win. They cannot win it because they don't fight that way. With the Palestinian resistance, they have met their match, and now they are finding out that the regional situation is not favorable to them. And they understand that Benjamin Netanyahu clique, as well as really the entire Israeli political establishment, and unfortunately, much of its so-called civilian settler population, which has a huge stake in the continued expansion of Israel, they are all finding out that the situation for them is not as favorable as it may have once been in the past. This war, we can't even call it a war, this genocide in Gaza has been possibly the spark that lights the match to the flame that takes Israel into ashes. And it would be, I think it would be remiss not to note that Iran has these capabilities. And this isn't even mentioning the entire axis of resistance. So Iran's response could be coming very soon. Whatever it is, it's going to be measured, it's going to be smart, and it's going to be done with the aim of not expanding this into a broader war, particularly with the United States, because that would shake up everything from the global economy to the regional situation in ways that would take away from the Palestinian cause. So Iran is going to do this carefully. They're likely going to hit Israeli military assets, and they're probably going to hit them pretty hard, but it won't be a response that will pull in the United States. The United States has tapped out unless the response is to the degree where Israel finds itself forced by political pressure to ignite a war that would be unthinkable, especially in regards to, as Sputnik said, and as we should all know, Israel has nuclear weapons. And that is really why there is such a huge problem right now when it comes to stopping Israel. There is the nuclear trump card that Israel has that is difficult to overcome. And so Iran's response is coming. We're going to have to continue to watch. But the point here is that this is not going to be pretty for Israel. This is not going to be easy. Not only is it not going to be easy, but the whole world is watching, and much of the world wants to see Israel held accountable, especially in the region. Of course, in Iran, there have been huge marches. Al-Quds Day just happened. Huge marches in support of Palestine. There's huge numbers of people angry about what happened to General Saidi. And so Iran has to respond. What that will look like, we will have to see, but it's likely going to be big. And Israel is going to have to take note that it does not have the military advantages that we all were told it had. And so there will be hell to pay should the United States, should Israel take this too far. The Biden administration cannot handle it. And so we're going to have to see what happens. Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.